Good morning on Tuesday, August 30th. Hopefully, for those of you who have children that went back to school this week, hope you had a phenomenal back to school. I have one back to school and I have another one that goes back Thursday, and Thursday can't come soon enough. I never understood how hard it was to manage the summer until you have kids that are in the summer and you're like, holy shit, this is a lot going on. But anyways, hope everybody's having a great back to school week. Stay tuned too. There's some things going on. I know a bunch of different people are doing some back to school things that we're going to try and contribute to in terms of our squad and our community to give back. So more details to come if you're looking to give back in different ways to the kids going back to schools, but we'll have more detail for you on that. Today is all about perspective. Okay. Last week we had about 70 people in and across the Milwaukee area who trekked down to Austin, Texas for mega camp, essentially 2 days. On top of it, you had probably another 30 to 40 people that tuned in live digitally or remotely here from the Milwaukee area. So roughly about 100 people across our total orbit of about 350, 400 folks across Tosa, North Shore, and Lake Country, right? Really, really healthy. There were some incredible things that came out of last week. I'm going to share with you today high level detail. For those of you that paid attention to the market update, I'm going to dumb it down for you as like a first grader, because I think it's very, very important for you to hear. Okay. Your job as agents is to provide perspective for your clients. And when your clients have a healthy perspective on where the market is and where the market is going, you will allow them to initiate the process to either buy or sell. If they don't have a healthy perspective and they only read the media or they only have certain things and they're not going to you as their go-to resources in terms of being the economist of choice, guess what happens? Your clients will continue to sit on the sidelines and then you won't have deals to be had. Okay. There's two things, the harsh realities of where we are, and we'll get into it here in a second. One, there are more members of the National Association of Realtors than ever before, right around 1.5 million members. Okay. We're on pace this year to do 4.8 million transactions. So what does that mean? We're on pace to have the lowest productivity per agent across our industry in its history. Let that sink in. 1.5 million agents, 4.8 million transactions is what we're on pace to do in 2022. We're on pace to have the lowest productivity per agent. Our job, to make sure that you're part of the cream of the crop, to increase your levels of productivity, to make you think, and to provide you perspective so that you can get your clients off the fence and into the game. Make sense? Awesome. So jumping right into it, I wanted to share a couple things because I don't think people totally fully understand the impact the investment has that people make of their time, money, and energy to attend down in Austin, right? It's a great example of pulling different groups together. There was a happy hour on Tuesday afternoon with groups from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Milwaukee, Chicago, people from all over the country, right? And people had the opportunity to network. And I think what is lost in all of this in terms of the educational component or the educational aspect of Mega Camp is the ability and opportunity to network with your peers across the country, to learn from what Tommy's doing in Chicago, what Joe Zimmerman's doing in Chicago, to learn what those guys are doing to bring the consumer experience to their client. Because you either provide a functional service or you provide a consumer experience. And there's a very direct difference between the two, right? And the opportunity that comes from creating these networks across the country, I think are very, very healthy because diversity of thought and diversity of approach is always healthy as we look to where it is that we are and where it is that we're trying to go. So big shout out to the group that made the investment of their time, energy, and money to head down to Austin, Texas last week. I think you'll hear from a group later on this morning as it relates to why they made the decision to make the investment and the impact it had on them and what it is that they took away from their experience down in Austin. Also, I want to give a shout out to those that tuned in locally, right? And did it remotely. I get it. It's an investment of your time, energy, and money to make it. Not everyone can do it down there in Austin, but a shout out to those that did it locally here. And they were sharpening their sword as we head into the storm that's about to hit, right? How do you slay a dragon? A really sharp sword. So time to sharpen our swords. So couple opening themes for you that I took away as it relates to the beginning of the mega camp as it relates to, as we look into 100,000-foot view of where the market's going. First, Gary, Jay, and Jason talked a lot around buffaloes walk headfirst into a storm, right? The fastest way through the storm is to charge it. So you can't be afraid about the industry that we're heading into or where the market is going. You have to look at it and say, you know what, there's 4.8 million transactions that are going to happen on a national basis. That's an opportunity for me to earn my right at the business and the market share that I deserve, that I've earned or desired. Or B, there's 4.8 million people that are moving across the US. Where do I have an opportunity to create a referral for me and my network across the US? You have to be thinking about it nationally, not just here in Milwaukee. Two, you have to lead from the front. If you want to be a market leader, you have to take share in a shift. The largest membership, and I alluded to this earlier, it's the largest membership in NAR history, and it correlates to the smallest productivity per agent. Okay, just being real with you. Three, the question is, are you filling a function or are you creating a lasting experience? The consumer experience is what matters most, not our credentials, right? It's what creates lasting clients forever. And I'm going to leave you with two thoughts before I transition into the market of the moment. One, productivity limits anxiety. I'm going to say that again. Productivity limits anxiety. The reason why you create anxiety, stress, pressure, or whatever it is that you feel is because you have real bills, you have kids, you have mouths you have to feed, you have people you have to support. Guess what happens when you have checks coming in consistently? You can sleep easier at night. You can do the things that you desire. You can build the life by design. Productivity limits anxiety. You only have 24 hours in a day. What it is that you do with those 24 hours a day and the activities in which that you activate and efficiently use that time will help you create the productivity you desire. Lastly, facts tell stories. Facts tell, stories sell. So what I'm going to do is give you the facts of where we are and help you correlate the story, because your job is what? Provide perspective for your clients to help people get off the fence. Make sense? All right, let's jump into it. So, real estate industry, market of the moment. These are all slides that were shared with the group that participated in Mega Camp last week, right? For those of you, this is going to be a repeat, and that's all right. My job is to dumb it down for those of you who didn't read the books and used to read, what was it, Purple Monkey or Pink Monkey in high school, where you didn't read the book, but you read the Cliff Notes version of the book. My job is to give you the Cliff Notes. I used it a lot, so. People think I'm very smart. I was a very average student. I just knew how to play the game. All right, home sales on an annual basis. So let's take a look at the last essentially 30 years going back to 1990. What do you guys need to know? Here's what you need to know. From 2002 to 2006, there were 32.2 million sales over the 5-year period. It was the most productive home selling period in the US's history, okay? We are going through a very similar 5-year period. Again, the market always corrects itself over a 5-year period. So what do you need to know as it relates to this 5-year period? We're on pace right now to sell 27.4 million homes over this 5-year period on a projected 5.1 million sales is what they were projecting probably late spring, early summer. Okay, 27.4 million homes over the 5-year period. What you also have to pay attention to is coming out of 06 and going into 07 and 08, the next 2-year period, what happened? In 07, the market was down 23%. In 08, the market was down 37% over a 2-year period. The market went from 7.1 million transactions to 4.1 million transactions overnight. Okay, 2 years is really, really fast. Now, don't be afraid. Go head fast into the storm, and I'll tell you why you shouldn't be afraid. Okay, let's take a look at home sales on a monthly basis. Here's what you have to understand as it relates to this chart, and there's a lot of bars on this graph. The orange is 2020 as it projects out on an annual basis, beginning in January, going through the month. Okay, the blue bar is 2021, the green bar is 2022. Okay, here's what I want you to pay attention to. In January, it was predicted that we would sell around 6.5 million homes, okay? So that the tide was receding a little bit in the month of January, right? But it was still going to be a really, really healthy, incredible year. And again, if you compare it to what they were predicting in 2020, it was 5.4 million, right? For that annual basis. Last year was 6.7. This year, they were predicting in January 6.5. Okay, then we have to move ahead to February. And two things happened in February that I'm sure you're all paying attention to unless you lived under a rock. Okay, what are the two things? Yes, to an extent, but interest rates were a byproduct of the first thing. Inflation skyrocketed in February, and Russia invaded Ukraine, creating a geopolitical conflict. That happened on February 24th of 2022. Okay, so Russia invades Ukraine, which turns markets upside down, creating a geopolitical conflict, and inflation begins to soar, impacting investor confidence. So what happens, Ross? Interest rates went up. In order to curb inflation, they had to pull the lever on interest rates. And what happens then? It impacts a buyer's ability to create affordability. Okay. And at the same time, the markets are a little bit in chaos. If you've been paying attention, the markets are down about 20% on a rounded basis, 20% this year. So that person that was maybe sitting on a $200,000 nest egg lost $40,000 overnight, right? Impacts their affordability. So what happens? Demand starts to soften a bit. Okay. You can see here as we finish into July, at the end of July, they're now predicting around 4.8 million units, coming off of 6.5 million, what they predicted in January. So they're adjusting their forecast by almost 35%, right? The point of this is the markets are moving faster than they've ever moved, and the chaos is happening faster than we've ever seen. Take COVID as an example. COVID, everybody was losing their shirts March, April, May, and all of a sudden June, July through the rest of the year, everybody was like, holy shit, right? The market's moving faster than it did in 06, 07, 08, but there's different factors at play, which we'll talk about here in a second. So market factors are massively different than 2008. So we have to take a look at why that's at play so that you can provide healthy perspective to your clients so that they aren't pulling the fire alarm as it relates to what it is that their plans are in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, right? Couple things. First, home prices on an annual basis. Here's what you need to understand about this chart. The yellow is the long-term appreciation of 4% over the history of homes. So what that's saying is over the history of home pricing, we have seen an annual appreciation of about 4%. So at a 4% appreciation over an annual basis, this is the trend line of where homes should be. Okay. The annual median home price is the bar graphs. What happened after coming out of 08 is we had a 13-year period where price appreciation and values took 13 years to recover, where it didn't keep up with a 4% appreciation rate. Okay, took 13 years. In a matter of 2 years, though, from 21 to 22, it caught up and far surpassed it. Okay, and there were major factors of supply and demand at play here. Okay, so you remember, first rule of thumb as it relates to why is the market totally different than 2008? The factors of Econ 101. And who took Econ 101? What are the factors of Econ 101? Supply and demand. There you go. There's your first lesson in the morning as it relates to providing perspective for your clients. Now, let's take a look at home prices on a monthly basis. Okay, what you need to understand about this chart is the yellow line is the 30-year fixed mortgage rate going back to January of 2020. And you can see the trend on a monthly basis of where it did and where it was going. And then you can see the bar graphs as it relates to the bar graphs are the purple lines, right? The purple lines are the median home price in thousands on a monthly basis going back to January 2020. Two things to notice here. Appreciation continues to spike despite massive increase in interest rates. Okay, the appreciation continues to spike. I'm going to tell you why that is here in a second. Okay, so it's all, the story is building, the story is building. It's all about perspective. Now, let's take a look at inventory. And I'm going to share now, I took some of the national trends and now I'm going to overlay the Southeastern Wisconsin trends for you guys to understand the difference between the national trends and the Southeastern Wisconsin trends, okay? So the national trends, again, this is monthly inventory. The orange box or the orange graph is 2020. The purple graph is 2021. The light blue graph is 2022, okay? What you can see here in July of 2022 is that the months of supply inventory across the US is around 3.3 months of supply. Okay, a balanced market says 6 months of supply. right? And you can see that that's really risen pretty substantially since January, when it went from 1.6 to essentially 3. So it's doubled in the course of 6-7 months, right? On a national basis, right? And you can see the trends, as I wrote in my notes, how it happened in 2020, the impact of 2021, and the impact of 2022. Now, yet Southeastern Wisconsin, we're seeing a very different perspective. Let me show it to you. Okay, if you look here last year, March, April, May, June, July, we stood anywhere from around 1.5 months of supply to 1.7 months of supply. Now I'm going to fast forward to the exact same months, March, April, May, June, July of 2022, and we're sitting at very similar months of supply. Okay, so what you're seeing from a national perspective is inventory continues to ride. The good news, or bad news, depending on the side of the aisle that you sit on, whether you're sellers or buyers, is that the inventory situation continues to remain pretty suppressed. We have not seen a doubling of the months of supply inventory that the national averages have, right? It's positive signs as it relates to supply and demand factors within our marketplace. Now, let's take a look at days on market. Days on market are important for two reasons. One, velocity and rate of sale. Okay, so on a national level, we talked about how the months of supply has essentially doubled. It's up 100% since January as we look at July now. And if you look here, as it relates to velocity and rate of sale and how it correlates to days on market, what happens on a national basis, right, is days on market has continued to remain relatively suppressed. So yet the fact that inventory is going up, days on market continues to remain the same, is velocity and rate of sale is telling us that demand, despite inflation, despite affordability, despite rates, still actually remains relatively strong on a national basis. Okay, now let's take a look on a local basis. Southeastern Wisconsin, these are the 5-county metro area. Okay, you can see here the peaks and valleys. Again, the peaks happen always November, December, January. The peaks and valleys as it correlates to where we are in 2022 versus where we were in 2021 versus where we were in July of 2020. Okay, point being is velocity and rate of sale still continues to be incredibly healthy in Southeastern Wisconsin. Again, despite all the other pressures that are going on within the marketplace. Okay, that's all good news for everybody who's sitting in the rooms listening to what's going on across Southeastern Wisconsin. Now let's take a look at mortgage rates. Okay, again, historical perspective is incredibly important. Everybody wants, here's what I hear when people are like, oh, you should hear what my parents bought a house for in 1980s. It was 16%. And I correlate that to, I used to walk to school up 2 miles up a hill without boots on in the snow. I was like, guess what? I don't care. I didn't buy a house in 1980. All right. Yeah, right. But here's my point to it. Even though that's what I hear when people are like, oh, I bought a house in 1980 at 16% interest rates. The story in terms of the perspective is still very healthy that people need to really wrap their arms around. The fact that interest rates are hovering right around 5 to 6% right now, going back to 1972, still you can see across this chart. I mean, if you're going to look at this and someone was really pushing your buttons as it relates to affordability, just have this one chart right in front of them and say, guys, we're fine. Because guess what's going to happen? Rates are going to go back down. You'll have the opportunity to refi, but they won't go below 2-3% like they were before. Why? Those were unicorn situations, and the federal government was pulling every lever they could to get us out of where we were in 2020, right? So we have to understand, you know what? Time in the market beats timing the market. Don't try and time the market. Just get into the market, and time over task is what will get you through it, right? So as it relates to a monthly perspective, from mortgage rates perspective, this was essentially 40-year period or 50-year period going back to 1972. Here's what we have from January 15 all the way to July of 2022. And you can see how the interest rates have really kind of hovered anywhere between, basically on average for the last 7 years, 3.5%. Okay. You can see how since January, they've really spiked to July at almost 5.5% across a national basis. I read a lot of things in the last 2-3 days that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are predicting sub 5% in the first quarter or second quarter of 2023. And that you'll see roughly around 4.5% by next summer. Again, Time in the market beats timing the market. So if prices are going to continue to appreciate because of our supply and demand factors, what's better? Getting the house now at 350 or getting the house next year at 400? And okay, let's take a look at the impact of the mortgage rates of a 0.5 percentage point. Losing $100,000 in equity on the home over the 12-month period is far more impactful than the 0.5 percentage point that you can refi and get out of. And that cost of that expense is very nominal over the course of the 30-year term, right? Again, providing perspective is what will get your clients off the edge. So what does this mean for the US economy? We talked about perspective as it relates to our industry. Here's my takeaways from the US economy from the conversation. One, 5.7% GDP growth rate is an inferno and unsustainable. If we may, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I don't know if we'll ever see something that roaring again in our lifetime. In a normal economy, anybody who saw a 2% growth rate in the GDP would be really happy. So perspective is important as it relates to where the health of our economy is. I think there's two factors at play that are hurting the macro markets. I think the geopolitical conflicts as they arise, whether it's with China and some of the trade wars, whether it's with Russia and Ukraine, like that's going to continue to impact our global markets. And so that's going to impact people's liquidity or equity that they can take out to buy a home. We just have to be aware of that, right? That's going to soften demand. But as it relates to the total economy being around 2%, any administration would take a 2% growth rate on GDP any given day of the year. Again, we're coming out of something where recency bias is what's holding us back. Okay, unemployment. This is another big fact that you have to understand because this is my big takeaway from the entire conversation. Unemployment. You have to understand 4% is fully gainfully employed marketplace. Okay, so anytime you're below a 4% unemployment rate, the market's pretty much gainfully employed. Here was the biggest takeaway I took in terms of why I have a lot of I can sleep easy at night, or I have a lot of peace of where I believe the storm is heading, right? Is this factor right here. You have two things at play. The bars are open jobs across the US on a national basis, okay? The blue bars. The orange line is your unemployment rate, okay? The unemployment rate across the US. This gap single-handedly is what will continue to keep our industry afloat and will prevent what we saw in 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay. The gap between the number of available jobs within the US and a single family's ability to earn an income, right, is what will allow us to continue to provide the opportunity to sell homes or help people buy homes in the next 3-4 months, or sorry, 3-4 years, right? This gap is why I can sleep easy at night. This would be a totally different picture if we were predicting a 50% or 40% drop in units from 7 million units to 4.8 million units. I think there are other factors at play, but if people don't have money to buy something, there's nothing to buy. So the fact that there is an enormous amount of available jobs with an incredibly low unemployment rate will continue to increase wage inflation, right? Which will provide our clients the opportunity to get into homes. It's, again, our job to provide perspective as to why the time is right for them to buy or sell. And when we help them provide that healthy perspective, we'll help them through the process to navigate it successfully. But to me, this was the money slide across of why I can sleep easy at night on a macro basis moving forward. Does that make sense? Perfect. So the other thing that's important to understand is affordability, right? P&I is principal and interest as a percentage of the income. So affordability has, as we've talked about, gone really down the tubes lately, whether it's rent has gone up, whether it's rates have gone up on mortgages, whether it's the appreciation of the asset of the home continuing to rise at a 10, 12, 15%, right? So in June of 2022, nationally, 25% of Americans of their monthly budget went to their principal and interest payments, right? Because of a decrease in affordability. Again, time in the market beats timing the market. If you look at this, going back to January of '89, it hovers and it rises and falls like the tide Time in the market beats timing the market. You can't worry about it as it relates today. The other thing is, continued inflationary pressures will cause rents to increase, putting more pressure on affordability. So I want to flip the script because everybody wants to be a listing agent, but there's listing agents and buyer agents. Yes or yes? Okay. So what you have to understand in terms of providing perspective to your clients is helping them talk through or walk through the affordability conversation, because you serve two people. If you're a listing agent, your seller more than likely is also going to be a buyer. Okay. And if you're a listing agent, you need a pool of buyers in order to acquire the asset you're trying to sell. And so we need to get both. We need to get really good at having conversations around the affordability aspect and how we help talk our clients through that. So whether you're a listing agent who then ultimately becomes a buyer's agent because they have something to buy, or we're mainly buyer focused, which many people are, and there's nothing wrong with that. Having those conversations to get people off the fence and into the game is what will help listing agents flip their inventory and get the market moving again. But if we don't have that perspective and we aren't the economist of choice for our clients, guess what happens? They sit on the sidelines, then the inventory becomes stagnant, and then the entire train comes to a halting stop. So we have to get really good at being both buyer's agents and selling agents, because the perspective on both sides of the aisle is important to continue to create demand within the marketplace. Does that make sense? That perspective is really, really healthy. Now, the agent's responsibility is provide that perspective, because that's what we're getting into. So as it relates to industry topics, handful of other things. I talked about this ad nauseum in the very beginning, I believe. Again, 1.5 million licensed agents. You can see as it correlates to the increase in the median price point of homes. A lot of people are trying to get into the industry. Fewer people are making really good money in the industry. Okay. Our job is to create the top 20%. Speed of the leader, speed of the pack. What are we doing to help you create productivity? What are we doing to remove obstacles within your business? How are we helping you create efficiencies so that you can create systems and models to go capture a shitload of the 4.8 million units across the US? Does that make sense? That's our job. That's what we owe to you. And that's what our responsibility is to you. The economic risks in all of this, and this is why you're seeing those projections soften a little bit, is one, the Federal Reserve is a very reactionary arm of the government, right? So they over tighten as it relates to what they do with interest rates, what they do with capital markets, different things like that. There's going to be global spillover, as whether it's the Chinese economy, whether it's the Ukraine-Russian thing, whether it's geopolitical politics, always cause chaos in equity markets. Okay, so that the more unrest we have on a global scale, just know that markets are going to go into chaos because of it. And escalation of global conflict and trade barriers are all things that we have to be paying attention to. These are pretty standardized things as it relates to what the impact it has on the housing market, right? And I talked about this a little earlier as it runs rising rapidly with inflation. I mean, if any of you guys have been paying any attention to the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, anybody see what the latest stat was? The average rate of a rent in New York City? 18 months ago, it was less than $2,000. It was around $1,850. This month, $4,200 a month. It's nearly doubled, right? Nearly doubled. So again, you have to be both a selling agent and a buyer's agent. 4.8 million transactions out there. How you get the transaction doesn't matter. Go get a transaction done. But having those conversations to get renters into becoming buyers is really incredibly important. And then they talked about the impact of liquidity, and not so much liquidity, sorry, equity of owning, renting and investing, and renting and 10% investing. And essentially, the fastest way to grow balance sheet wealth over the next, or in the last 10 years, has been those that have owned. And how if you own, you grew your equity faster than you would have otherwise in the markets or anywhere else. Yes.
There was a presentation at Mega Camp from an agent that did a lot of first-time home buyer seminars, and her two things were get off the rent roller coaster and get a fixed budget for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Secure a loan, a 30-year loan, you know what your monthly payment is every month. If you're renting right now, you know if your lease comes due, you're kind of like afraid to open the mailbox. with landlords. I thought that was brilliant to say, you've now fixed your budget for the next 30 years.
Yeah, Jay's point was at Mega Camp, there was an agent who did a lot of first-time homebuyer seminars. And they said the impact they had in terms of securing their clients was when you rent, you're riding a roller coaster. The landlord controls your rent. It goes up, it goes down. You have no say over whether it goes up or down, and you have no control over it. When you buy, you're fixing your budget for the next 30 years. You know you're going to pay $1,500 a month, and that is a fixed amount based on what the mortgage is. And that is what helped that agent really build a first-time homebuyer business. Incredibly smart way to look at it, because most everybody budgets on what they can take home on a monthly basis, and then where the dollars go from there as it relates to a monthly standpoint. There you go. In 35 minutes, my goal was to take a 3-hour, 2-hour presentation to boil it down to give you the cliff notes. Okay. The cliff notes as to where are we going? What does it look like? Yes, the market's softening. Perspective is important. It's our job to provide perspective to get people into the game, because we need both buyers and sellers in the game, and having those conversations with both buyers and sellers as it relates to how we play the game and the impact and the macroeconomic impacts as to what it is that's going on with their investment are critically important, because people are going to continue to buy and sell. The question is are they going to continue to buy and sell with you, or are they going to continue to buy and sell with someone else who provides them the healthy perspective they need or want or are seeking? Right? Now, I'm going to shift the script a little bit here as well. I'm going to ask a handful of people, 5 people, some questions. Okay. I talked about the macro trends. I asked 5 people across a wide variety of backgrounds, a wide variety of production standpoints to give you a healthy perspective on what their takeaways were from those who attended Mega Camp live in person. Right? So for those of you who are live, Abby, Kathy, Dwamel, Steve, come on up. Nikki Kunik or Liz Mitchke, I'm going to start with you. You with me?
I'm here.
Perfect. Liz Mitchke, what was your takeaway from attending Mega Camp, right? As an agent on a team who's been really successful in the last couple of years, what was the impact Mega Camp had on you and being present there? And what was your takeaways and what you're going to do moving forward?
It really did concrete a lot of things that we have been doing in our team, which felt really amazing. But the biggest thing is honestly practice. Keep going and moving in this market that's constantly changing. The biggest takeaway that I had was script practice and handling objections, which everyone's already starting to see when it comes to buyers or sellers. So, and sharing that amongst each other.
Awesome. Would you say it was worth your time and investment?
100%.
Love it. All right, Dwamel, I'm going to ask you next. You got to come up here because you're in front of you're on the big screen. So, Dwamel, for someone who's new to our environment, right? What was the impact it had on you, and what was your takeaways in terms of what you plan to implement moving forward?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was just being able to network with a bunch of out-of-state people like myself. You know, just being able to network with other agents across the globe, having those connections, and one of the biggest takeaways was winning the morning to win the day. I mean, since I've come back, I've been implementing a lot of the things that I learned throughout Mega Camp, just making sure that before noon, I'm handling all of the things that I need to take care of, just so that I can win the day.
Beautiful. And was it worth your time, energy, and investment?
Man, do it all over again next year.
Perfect. All right, Nikki Kunik, I'm leaning on you. First time, long time listener, first time participant. What was your take on Mega Camp, the impact it had on you, and things that you plan to implement?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I think my biggest takeaway, I know Dwamel just said being with people from other states and around the country, but for me, it was more about even networking with people in Milwaukee that I don't ever see or interact with from the North Shore, just because I'm typically out here. Like, I sat next to Kathy Shaw at dinner and we talked for like 20 minutes. I would never probably have the opportunity to talk to Kathy Shaw or have the conversations I had with Abby or rooming with Catherine, who's on a team. So getting different perspectives from her. So just even being with people in Milwaukee, I think was awesome. And then the biggest takeaway from the panelists and from Gary for me was the go small to go big. And so just there was an agent who does north of 140 million a year on her team, and all she does is make 20 contacts a day. She's like, yeah, I'm really basic. She didn't have any like crazy stories or events that she does or anything that she puts a lot of energy into, and her team is super, super successful. So you can go back to the basics and be really successful in this business.
Worthy time, energy of your investment?
Yes, it was. And I was using this year as, hey, let's see how this is. I haven't gone yet, and let's see if I'll ever go back. And I definitely would.
Perfect. Love it. Thanks, Nikki. All right, Kathy Shaw, your dinner mate. Kathy Shaw, you've been to events like this before.
Yes.
What was different about this year for you, and what was the impact that it had on your business?
Well, I had 3 takeaways. One was what Nikki said, which is show up. One of the things that Gary talked about in the opening session was we were able to swing and react to the pandemic and be remote, and we could be really productive remote. And I felt myself staying in that lane. And in talking to industry leaders, he talked about how in other industries, presidents, CEOs are talking about the pendulum needing to swing back because we've gotten away from connecting with others, the culture that we can maintain, the energy, and, you know, showing up was a big takeaway for me, showing up there, because like Nikki said, I was able to be, you know, it's the meeting after the meeting, like we're here today and you're going to talk to the person next to you, or you're going to mean to talk to John Molitor about something. Showing up is half the battle is in anything we do in life. So that was a huge takeaway and a recommitment that I wanted to be more present for myself and pouring into myself. And by helping others, I'm helping myself. The other was, I love that Gary Keller talked about lead gen and said, I don't like lead gen. I'm like, oh my God, if he doesn't like it, then okay, I can secretly admit that I don't love it either. But he talked about like, I don't love lead gen, but I love the results. I love the results more than I dislike the activities around lead gen. And he gave a graphic, or they did a graphic, and it was how our time has been managed over the last couple of years. And it was like this over the last year was servicing clients. This was lead gen. Well, today this is lead gen and this is servicing. That graphic was right between the eyeballs for me. That was getting back to the basics. You don't have to do a million things, but go small to get big. Pick one lever, open houses, or you're automating your sphere touches. Just do that really well. Last thing I connected with was just getting better at skills. And I remembered Laura, when you used to do a scripts group here, and I was thinking like, let's get back to like those basics. This market center gives us so many opportunities, or the shift call on Facebook with James Shaw, like just get into that. Natasha, we were at the shift event with a couple weeks ago in New Berlin, and she was at my table, Natasha Duvall, and she has been in this business for 25 years. And what did she say the biggest obstacle was? Gosh, I've gotten away from negotiating inspections. I'm like, what? This woman has been in this business forever. She was talking about skill development and sharpening the tools. So those are my 3 takeaways, and I would 1000% do it again, because I think Gary Keller does what Charlie does really well. You know, he's like you, Charlie, is he takes like really complex issues and synthesizes it in a way that's easy to digest. So I felt like so informed, and you guys do it here too every Tuesday. So I would do it again.
Perfect. All right, next up, 2 more people that I want you to hear from. First up, Abby Wall. Again, Abby, longtime listener, first time caller, her first time at Mega Camp, her first experience. Abby, you have to come over here. Sit here.
Okay.
Abby, biggest impact, takeaways, what was things you plan to implement or things that you didn't think you would take away from that you're like, holy shit, okay, I need to do this.
Yeah. I just want to echo what Nikki and Kathy talked about. Like, one of the highlights for me was getting to know other agents from the Milwaukee Metro so much better, because when we're all here, we're all very busy, and our clients and families and everything here takes priority. And so to get out of Milwaukee, it was so fun. That part was awesome. And I would do it again just for that, to be honest. But then the panels, like I loved sitting there and absorbing all the content. I think for me too, getting out of Milwaukee mentally allowed me to focus more on growing my business and absorbing everything versus here. Like I tried the digital version last year and I was so distracted with everything here that was pulling on me here. And so getting out of Milwaukee mentally, I think opened me up a little bit more. And then honestly, like I'm a shiny object. I have a little bit of shiny object syndrome. I want to do all the things. So listening to all those panels was a little bit overwhelming. So I was like, oh, I could do that. And I could do that. And I could do that. That would be fun too. I think one takeaway from that was there's 100 different ways to be successful in this business. And all of those agents that were interviewed has found one that really works for them, that they enjoy so much that they love doing it. And so I think that was the big question for me is like, what would I love doing so much that I will do it because I love it? Even if I'm so busy with all these other things, this is something I love so much and it brings me a lot of life. It feels light. And so for me, it's going to be client events because I really like hanging out with people. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abby. All right, last one. And this is a little bit of a curveball. Here's why. For those of you who don't know Steve, when did you leave your job?
Like a month ago,
Okay, so Steve had and you were at Rinka? HGA.
He wasn't.
6 years.
Okay. So Steve Weber, who's Lindsay Weber's husband, took a big jump in faith to make a big bet on himself and his relationship with Lindsay to build an incredibly big business and to build a life by design. Okay. He left a very, very well-paying job in kind of what I would consider to be a very corporate environment to make a big bet. Right. And a part of that big bet was him and Lindsay as a unit went to Austin, Texas. And for someone who very similarly to me 6 years ago when I left corporate America and I made a bet on myself to come into this business, like I've never sold a home, right? Never sold a home. I've never been licensed. For those of you who don't know that. But I wanted Steve's perspective because Steve is a total outsider who's never really, he's just getting ingrained into KW. He's just trying to help Lindsay scale their team, their businesses. You know, they've run all other businesses besides real estate team. And I wanted Steve to provide an outsider's perspective from kind of a more corporate viewpoint as we start to shift his framework into the real estate business. And I thought his perspective would be something vastly different than, you know, the agent who's shared perspectives before. So Steve, I'm going to ask you to share your takeaways.
Thanks,
Yeah.
So aside from the brisket at Franklin Barbecue, which is probably the real number one takeaway, I think also echoing everybody else, meeting everybody and really getting to spend some real time with all these names that I've heard a million times for the last 6 years. That was great. But one thing that really summed it up for me was this quote that I had never, kind of embarrassingly never heard before, which is, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 6 sharpening my axe, which is an Abe Lincoln quote. And I think that really kind of wrapped up, I thought, the theme of the whole week or the couple days, which is really get organized and get intentional and be intentional. I think the key thing that kind of comes out of that is, in this down market, we really need to shift the majority of our time to lead generation, or as somebody else described it, he doesn't like to say lead generation. Instead, it's making new friends, which I think has been the story of this 4 weeks so far, is kind of making new friends for me. But also, I think in the not just making new friends, but creating an experience was really, really important, but also providing value. And somebody, I think Gary said that we've really shifted from a service economy to a skills economy, which all respect to Gary Keller, I was like, I don't know if that's exactly true. To me, it's really a skills and service economy, and it's both. And we're not really moving out of one into another. But it's really that people are more and more expecting not just service, but expert service. And so I think really being an expert, taking everything that Charlie has said today, taking everything that we absorbed from the last couple of days or mega camp, and really turning that into something that we know and we know kind of intrinsically, so we can explain it to our clients to provide that value, to provide that perspective, but also creating a relationship along the way. So that was kind of the highest level stuff. I have like pages and pages of notes on how to like turn that into actions, which I have to digest and really think through with our team. But yeah, so
4
that's-
weeks into it, would you say it was worthy of your time?
Absolutely. And again, the brisket was something else. So
Cool.
thanks.
I think it's important to provide perspective from your peers as it relates to why it is they made the investment to go, or why it is they have made the investment of their time to plug in digitally, right? And I think what you heard is two things. One, the world is run by those who show up. You have to do the activities if you want to change your results. Two, we're going into a skills-based market. When you're going from a roughly 7 million closed units last year to 5 million closed units this year, those with the sharpest axe will be the ones that are able to chop down the most trees. And what does your axe look like, and how are you going to sharpen it? I think ultimately will help you get out of it. One other thing I wanted to point out, it's kind of putting a bow on Mega Camp, is there was an absolute, I think this is probably the best part about what they did for Mega Camp, is everybody who was on a panel described their system of what they executed. And then what KW did is they put that system and execution into playbooks so that you didn't have to go back and look at all your notes to say, oh my gosh, that one person from Maryland, what did they say and how did they do it? They created their processes and systems for you to take away as it relates to every single speaker on every single panel. So I pulled 2 or 3 of these as an examples, and I will make sure that we send this drive out as it relates to where you can find the systems and models that were discussed. But, you know, they talked about newsletters, social media systems, open houses, whatever, MOFers, right? Making offers for immediate responses. There's 5 examples of MOFers. There's 10 examples of social media. So the best part about it is they took the time to put these pen to paper so that you guys could look at what the systems and models were that people were implementing in order for you to implement them within your business moving forward. I will make sure that we send that out today for you to take a look at. Yes, Schroeder.
They also are showing the full interviews on the YouTube channel.
And they are showing, they are releasing the interviews on the panels on the Keller Williams YouTube channel as well. So we will make sure to get you that information as it's uploaded. Cool. All right. With that, I'm going to wrap it up because it's becoming a skills-based market, right? And if you want to chop down a tree and it takes you 8 hours, you better spend 7 hours sharpening your axe, right? Bold is back. Okay. I get it. Listen, everybody can shake their head. And next week, I'm going to share with you the results of those who go to Bold and those that don't. Stillman's my classic example. Stillman goes to Bold, his business is great. Stillman doesn't goes to Bold, his business sucks. All right. There's accountability in the room today. So Bold is back. We're going to share more details with you on September 13th. Here's what I know. For those of you who have preconceived notions to it, throw it out the window. Because guess what? You can't afford to not take it. One incremental deal because of something you do in Bold more than pays for itself. Okay. It is going to be on Wednesdays in October and November. Where are we hosting it? The Milwaukee County Zoo Conference Center.
You know who the coach is then?
Dennis Russell. Dennis Russell will be our coach. He's going to be joining us September 13th to talk a little bit more about it. Here's what you need to know about Dennis. Dennis spent 13 years in the military. He was a captain in the infantry. He will run a very tight ship. For those of you who might remember, a few years ago, he came to Johnson Creek when we had a little bit of a kerfuffle, and he helped lead a day. Dennis is an incredibly powerful individual. I also have a soft spot in my heart for many of you who know this. I have a huge affinity for the military and their leadership style and the way that they hold people accountable. So if you want to sharpen your axe, I would highly, highly, highly consider Bold. Here's the other thing. We are closing the room at 100 people. There will not be 130. There won't be 140. We're closing the room at 100. Okay, you're the first to hear about it. Okay. Here are the dates. The first one is Tuesday, October 11th. Everything else will be on a Wednesday, the 26th, November 2nd, Wednesday, November 9th, so on and so forth. Stay tuned for more details. And here's the thing. Facts tell, stories tell. Facts tell, stories sell. I'm going to come at you next team meeting, which is Tuesday, September 13th, with all the facts and figures from everybody who took bold the last few years to show you the impact it has on their business. And I get it, guys. I want you to hear this from me. Raise your hand if you like taking bold. Okay, raise your hand if you don't like taking bold. I hate it. And yet, it gives me the lead generation systems and the ways and the accountability to make sure that we're successful. So if you've never taken it, I highly encourage it. Brad Yates, yes, you have something to say.
Not for me, but in general, even if it's scholarships for people that are, because I know that it was there for time and it was.
Yes.
It's great.
We have scholarships available for those of you who have financial need. We will roll those out on September 13th.
Good.
But I wanted to come out of Mega Camp to say we're in a skills-based market. How do we sharpen our axe and sharpen our sword in a skills-based market? Bold is coming back this fall in a very big way. And I'm incredibly excited for Dennis Russell, our coach. The militaristic style of an Army captain, you can't beat. It will sell out. So register quickly. Lastly, here's the other thing. We did this last month and we're going to do it again because it's like flexing a muscle. We're going back to do group lead generation. Thursday, September 8th, we're going to order pizza, 5 o'clock. We're going to dial for dollars, smile and dial, baby. So if you want to join us, all 3 locations, if you want to smile and dial, or if you want to learn how to smile and dial, here's what I know. 4 listing appointments came from the last time we did it. And we only had 10 people. 40% returns, not bad. So pizza call night, we're going to continue this, and we're going to, as leaders, we're going to continue to show up to do these so that people feel comfortable in what I call, some people call it lead generation, which I hate. I call it forced human interaction so I can make more friends. Last thing as it relates to team meetings, there's no team meeting next week, Tuesday, September 6th. Okay, Tuesday, September 6th, there's no team meeting post Labor Day. It's back to school for a lot of folks. I'll be dropping Chase off at Cumberland. Fuck. So, guys, hey, have a happy and safe Labor Day weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate all you do. Have a great day.